some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy Podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies. Hello, initiates. We have a little bonus episode for you today. A few weeks back, Neil and I were delighted to be interviewed by SOS and Sandee of the Tinfoil Tales Podcast. This was a great chat, and we both highly recommend you go and follow their show. I'll leave a link in the description. Now, take it away, SOS and Sandee.
Yeah, so just to introduce everybody here, we have got the boys have joined us over from the UK. Whereabouts are you at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm Brent Lee and I'm from Bristol, and Neil is up in Nottingham.
Bristol and Nottingham. I have no idea where they are. Sauce may know more. She was from that way originally.
Nottingham's right in the centre. It's where Robin Hood came from. So Kevin Costner.
From that. There we go.
And I'm from Bristol, where Banksy comes from. So that's a little bit better than Robin Hood.
She think that, but I don't know if it is. Like,
Okay.
You've got Massive Attack as well.
Yeah, Massive Attack, Tricky.
There you go.
Ronnie Size.
Oh, all right, you win.
Very good. So I'm going to kick off with the first question. And my first question to either or both of you is, what was your conspiracy pipeline? So if you think about when you were first just mildly curious about something to full blown in there, lizard people, chemtrails, all of it, like how long did that journey actually take? You know, is it months? Is it years?
Oh, not long actually, because sort of, I have a tendency to like get obsessed with things, and I found a couple of things and, became obsessed with them. The first thing that I really found was, Chris, who, everybody knows from the show. His granddad had got this DVD that was Ed Begley Jr., somewhere in New York doing a presentation about how he was doubtful about 9/11. So I watched that and was fascinated by it because it was like, just like, I was aware of like Waco and 9/11 and not 9/11, JFK and things like that. But this 9/11 thing just absolutely blew my mind. So very quickly after that, I discovered eBay, and on eBay there was numerous people that had conspiracy DVD shops, and if you bought one for about £3, they'd send you dozens and dozens and dozens, and so all of a sudden you just opened up to just all sorts of crazy wackiness. And I think pretty early on as well, we found the Bohemian Grove, the Alex Jones thing. And it's an interesting thing. We were talking on a space the other day, right? It was Poker and Politics said something that was really, really insightful. So that once you take something on board like JFK or Bohemian Grove and take it at face value, it alters the baseline of what you considered the government capable of doing. So like if you think that the government definitely killed JFK, which isn't completely unreasonable, but basically once you think that, then the idea that they might kill 3,000 people at 9/11 or whatever, it's not beyond belief. And that's just a very interesting point, because like the second that you take the Alex Jones thing on board, that, they're doing satanic rituals in the woods and stuff like that, it completely skews your perspective, basically. So it doesn't take long for you to become sort of really fascinated in all the weird stuff, and really search it out.
Yeah, same for me. It was a 9/11 truther documentary that opened me up to the wider community of conspiracism. I was always kind of interested in like Unsolved Mysteries TV show and like the Roswell stuff or JFK, maybe even John Lennon, like being killed by the CIA or something. I was always kind of interested in that stuff, but it's nothing that actually like defined my belief. You know, it didn't define my worldview or change my life in any way. But the minute I started watching 9/11 truther documentaries, everything changed because I just thought, okay, America has literally just killed 3,000 citizens on one day, and they're blaming it on people who hadn't done it. You know, and so the pipeline for me starts there, and I start kind of looking into, well, who are these people? And I keep hearing this stuff about George Bush and John Kerry being in the Skull and Bones. Well, what's the Skull and Bones? What is all this? And so it kind of starts opening me up to secret societies and Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Skull and Bones, etc. And that just was like started me like fumbling down the rabbit hole essentially. And I just would kind of be open to almost anything. Then I'm just open to at least entertain whatever ideas were going around.
Did you ever watch the oh sorry.
Do you think it's quicker now? Like, do you think, like, if you think about your journey and like people that you might have known pre-COVID and post-COVID, do you think that post-COVID to accept all of it is quicker? So you go from COVID's a scam to all of it in a very short period of time?
Yeah, totally. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily anything to even do with COVID. COVID's kind of the, it's the subject really, but it is the social media. That's the thing that's different. Now we've got TikTok videos, we've got memes, we've got all this stuff, which just make people change their minds instantly. You know, we were saying recently, like both me and Neil, we had to like buy physical books. We had to get DVDs. We had to endure 8-hour lectures to like actually soak this stuff up. Today, you can literally see people just making their mind up and basing their worldview on a few TikTok videos because other people are sharing them. So you get this kind of, they act like they don't believe in the consensus, but they're following a consensus of like their friends or their community that are sharing these specific little videos. So I think that's what it really is.
There used to be a lot longer ones as well, didn't there, Brent? Like, you remember the Chris Everard Illuminati film? That was one.
Oh, yeah. Like a 4-parter, wasn't it?
Yeah, totally. So all his sorts of films, they were quite high production values, but they were feature length. And then Alex Jones's films like Road to Tyranny and stuff like that, Police State, they were long films, so like 2 hours and stuff like that. But as you say, nowadays, people can just watch a sort of 10, 15 second TikTok, and that's all that they need, really. But yeah. So
a good example. A good example of like this is like the Wayfair conspiracy theory. Like that went around on TikTok and places like that, and it just became viral. And so many people started to believe it like so quickly without really having invested any kind of time into it.
Well, the social media gives you immediate access to like hundreds and hundreds of people that agree with you. Like, as you said, when we were doing it, we're sending off for videos on eBay and then sort of nervously telling your friends, I thought this thing about lizards, and hoping that they don't like walk away and shaking their head. Now, whatever your theory is, you can find a like-minded community within seconds that are going to go, oh, yeah, no, not only is that true, but even wackier shit is even truer. And so you don't have to convince people. Like, it used to be quite difficult. Like, here you go, read this entire book by Jim Keith to get my perspective. And, you don't need to do that anymore because there's people that will give you the highlights.
And when you were on the journey, when you were on your journey, did you find, and maybe this again might be impacted by social media, but like, at what point do you think that your family or your friends or your workmates started to go, oh, like, what the fuck's going on? What's going on here? Like, do you remember that point where you could sense your friends kind of going, oh shit, what's happening?
Oh, that was going on for years beforehand anyway, so... No, not really. Well, actually, kind of. It was at work for me, where all of a sudden somebody introduced me as the guy that'll tell you about all the Illuminati and stuff like that. And it suddenly struck me that shit, that's all I talk about. There was also a friend of mine that I sort of got into these through sort of Alex Jones DVDs and stuff like that. And I didn't see him for a couple of weeks. I came back and bumped into him, and he just downloaded at me, oh, this symbolism, and did you see this on the telly, and did you see that? And I went, oh my Christ, is that what I'm like? And so that sort of that was an instance with me where I was like, oh, I perhaps need to rein this in a little bit. I didn't, but at least I had the sort of, wherewithal to notice it.
Yeah, my friends were and family, like when it came to my entry point, like with 9/11, I don't think they were too shocked about what I was really saying. They just disagreed.
Yeah.
But then, like, when it comes to, like, say, the secret societies, the Freemasons, or like what Neil brought up earlier, like the Bohemian Grove video, that really convinced me that those people were evil and doing occult shit.
Yeah.
So if I tried to, like, share that with friends, like, they were kind of definitely would look at me like, are you mad? But I was like, you just haven't seen these videos, guys. You need to see what these people are doing. Like, honestly.
Like, did you find that frustrating? Like, I often wonder, like, how frustrating it must be when you're, like, to that point where you do think there's grooming and the trans agenda and all that kind of stuff. And, like, you're trying to explain it to your family and friends, and they're just like, shut up. Like, they don't see the danger. Like, that must be, like, incredibly frustrating.
It is incredibly frustrating. But I also had to just, like, accept that, well, maybe they're just not ready to be awake yet. There's only so much, because this is what we used to speak to each other on the forums. On, like, I used to be on the David Icke forum, and we'd have like a thread on there, like how to talk to people, how to talk to your friends and family. Can we wake them up? And there was always kind of this consensus amongst us all, like, well, maybe it's just not their time yet, and when it is their time, we'll be there for them. But it's incredibly frustrating trying to get people to understand that you think that this very, very bad thing is going on. The world is run by these evil people, and they're committing crimes against humanity. Like, you can understand that, like, even with the, like, anti-vax and anti-COVID movements today, like, they are venomous and rabid because they think that, like, the government or Bill Gates or the WEF or whatever is trying to kill her. And we're just, like, looking at them going, what are you talking about? You're being ridiculous. But they believe it so hard. So I can understand the frustrations. I've been there.
If we're being completely honest, and I'm sure Brent will agree with to a degree, that also sort of feeds into it. The idea that basically no one else believes you, and we're sort of like, we're like a minority fighting to get the truth out. That kind of sort of feeds into the fantasy of being a freedom fighter, being a truth teller and stuff like that. And to a degree, that becomes enjoyable because it makes you be separate from the norms, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely, it's so participatory. Like, I can see the draw of that, like I can see that you think that you are this digital warrior sitting at home, trying to find that little thing that someone hasn't seen yet that you can then add into the mix. And, you see it on Telegram, like someone will share something and everyone congratulates that person. And like, that must make people feel great.
Yeah, very, very, and quite quickly as well. You can get like a big hit within the scene or whatever, and like, people will all of a sudden start sending you messages telling you how brilliant you are and such like that, and it can snowball quite quickly. Like, particularly nowadays, if you do a video or something that says something, I mean, look at all the sort of the people that took advantage of COVID and whatnot, like that dreadful woman Louise Hampton and stuff like that. Clearly lying through their teeth and whatnot, but they said what people wanted to hear at that particular time, and that's why it got lapped up, basically.
I mean, you've probably got some good experience with this because of your books on mind control and MK Ultra. Like, because I knew of you, like when I was a truther because of these books. You know, like everyone was kind of like, oh, this is the definitive guide to MK Ultra. This proves that the people are doing like mind control. So you must have surely got quite a lot of like praise off of people when you first came out with that.
Oh yeah. The first time I went to like a conference or whatever, I had like people coming up to you and asking for autographs. Fucking autographs. Like, yeah, I know, it's mental, isn't it? I'll tell you something mental. This is slightly silly. Because I kept getting asked for my autograph, and because people wanted me to autograph books and stuff, I have two signatures. One which is my normal signature, and one which is my autograph signature, which, saying out loud isn't quite as cool as it sounded in my head. But yeah, that was a thing that I had to do. So yeah, this is the point. You do get praise and stuff like that, and it invites you into a community as well. Very, very quickly, you're surrounded by people. I remember the first time that I bumped into people like Nick Colostrom, for example, and I was like, I've seen him on the telly. By which I meant Rich Planet TV. Like, do you know what I mean? But you know what I mean? These are like people that you admire or that you've heard of. Like, I remember meeting Lloyd Pye and thinking, wow, this is incredible. This guy's like, you know, really up there with all the sort of modern thinkers and whatnot. So the whole aspect does feed into it. It is a bit weird at the minute because it's a bit nasty. Like, it used to be the point where basically everybody was quite sort of like, come on in and look, what's your theory? Okay, that's a bit odd, don't quite agree with that, but let's pop it on the, on the shelf with all the others. Now it's very sort of factional, like arguing over who's the most vaccine injured, or if you don't believe this, or if you don't think that the earth is flat, then you can't be trusted, or if you don't, and it's all sort of like, this is all getting quite overtly cult-like.
Well, interesting, because Sandee had a question about exactly that. Sandee, here's your cult moment.
Oh, yeah. We were just talking earlier. I remember in one of your podcast episodes, I've listened to a whole bunch of them. I can't remember, can't even go back to the one that was. But basically, you started explaining how this is like a cult, but there's no leader. But could you talk to us about, like, is this a cult or is it a cult-like thing? What is this that's going on?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's not a cult as in the sense of like a commune or something like that, but it's very similar to it. And I think one of the things it does, like, it's an ideology. So it's a cult-like ideology. This is how I kind of explain it from where I was. Maybe Neil wasn't quite as ideologically based as I was with it. But this is my own experience. And yeah, I tend to call it a cult-like ideology. And the thing that it kind of promotes, instead of having a cult leader, you have cult recruiters. And these are the speakers and the influencers and people like that are out there, like the David Icks and the Alex Joneses. Some people will try and say that they're the leaders, but they're not. They're the ones that are trying to indoctrinate you into this ideology. The thing that is different to any other sort of cult is that it makes you the leader. Your search for the truth is the leader. And what it does is it tells you, the key is here. Do your own research. So it puts 100%. You at the center, and you are the one that's a leader. And it makes you feel like you're free because you're the one walking through this path on your own. But you've got this community behind you as well. And you're all like these, essentially, like, you're all your own cult leaders. Wow. And you're all in this cult together. That's how I see it. But, some academics don't think it's a cult at all, but others do think it's very cult-like.
We do have some... Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Neil.
Well, I was just going to say that, like, the way that it's slightly slanted as well, although, like, there is a huge thing, like, oh, we have no leaders, we don't sort of, like, eulogize anybody and stuff like that. But on the other hand, it is David Icke stood on the stage in front of you for 8 hours, and you have just paid him 50 quid to watch him. And the course material that you end up researching just so happens to be his book. So, you know what I mean? So in some ways, there's subtle slantings towards the sort of mechanisms of a cult, basically. What it does, though, is and this is a sort of cult thing, but this is ubiquitous. It gives you a place in the world. It tells you what happens in the world, and it tells you your position in the world, and it tells you that you've got like-minded people who will psychologically support you. So basically, like, you know, if you're a flat earther, like, you know, oh, brilliant, I know exactly what the world is. That makes it far less complicated. And because you know, I'm Eric Dubay, so I'm top of the tree, and I also know what the world is like. So it works kind of like that. But to be fair, so does advertising. So does owning like Nike shoes or whatever, like, or having a Mercedes or anything like that, because they're emblems of where you are socially, that are bound up in a sort of idea about what is important in life, basically. So that's kind of what it offers you.
It's also, like you said before, like being a super fan of a band.
Yeah.
That is very much still, it's, you know, it's like we call those sorts of like a cult-like following. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, you like somebody that's got like, I don't just follow the bands. I go to every single gig and I've got their logo tattooed on my chest. Like, it's a bit like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's actually, yeah. We have recognized possibly in our, I'll have to maybe speak to you further on this, but we have recognized that SOS and I have recognized maybe we've got 3 cult leaders that are kind of coming out of all of this, where they do appear to be forming like this cult thing. But yeah, and for our listeners who have jumped on here, they probably already know who we're talking about, but like Hoodie, Bosie and Darren Bergworth, who are really like, they're forming cults. But anyway, yeah, so that was my question, about that one. So thank you very much for answering that one. So if you got any more?
Yeah, of course. Can I just add on there? Like, there is obviously, like, there are sub-cults that form around this that use conspiracism as at the end of the day, like, most cults are like pushing some sort of grand conspiracy. You know, there is a tie-in there together.
It's where the cult thing ends and where the business model starts, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Because, like, I mean, you could make the argument that Alex Jones has got a cult thing going on because everybody's buying his stupid pills and all his prepper food and all of that sort of stuff. And in order to do that, you've got to sort of be indoctrinated into the concept that, oh, the New World Order's coming any second, like, you know, it's all going to go west and stuff like that. But at what point, I suppose the distinction is like who believes it and who, if you had to sort of rank them or whatever, I'd put Alex Jones more as a sort of crooked businessman that utilizes ideas of the cult. And then I'd put David Icke more as a sort of wannabe cult leader that utilizes aspects of the conspiracy business model or something like that. So, like, I think although money is vital to both of them, and although sort of idolization is vital to both of them, I think that David errs more on he wants people to think he's brilliant. Alex doesn't give a shit. He just wants your money.
Yeah. Yeah, which was a little bit what we were talking about earlier, is this internal cult-like feeling, you know, where you think someone's got the best idea and that's almost your ride or die, is the way that it's set itself up here. Like, generally, you know, Ricardo Bosie doesn't like Graham Hood, so therefore all of the people who follow Bosie won't listen to anything that Graham Hood says. But I think what I saw during the recent voice referendum was that they have become a useful base of people for more nefarious people to leverage, you know, and whether that be mining or whatever, you know, for us, it was obviously the voice referendum. They tried to say it was, you know, someone started saturating the market with it was a UN takeover. And then all of a sudden they all were energized and probably the most active all on one thing, and were actually pretty successful at doing it. but none of it was their own idea. You know what I mean? It's like people above, right at the top going, oh shit, we don't want this. This is the last thing we want. Indigenous rights. What if they say they want the mining land back? Got to shut that down.
Oh, was that what it was about? Okay, that makes sense. I didn't realise that. But yeah, they kind of they can be utilised like sort of like football hooligans, like like your local teams will fight or whatever. But if it's an international, you'll put all that aside for this greater good, and that's what we saw with COVID as well. Like what was bizarre in the sort of in America, all the COVID protests were put on by this think tank called the Heritage Foundation, like which is essentially, ironically, could be described as the deep state because it's full of people like, Mike Pence and Mike Flynn and half of Donald Trump's cabinet and the oil industry, Koch brothers and stuff like that. In the UK, a lot of the protests were put on by the Church of Scientology in conjunction with this racist far right sort of quasi-political group called the English Democrats. And so but this is the problem is that basically when you get too involved in any of these ideologies, I mean, again, it doesn't necessarily sort of just, I mean, the football aspect is another one. You can be manipulated by somebody higher up the pyramid, so to speak. So, and that is the problem, is because basically a lot of people come to this with this sort of righteous anger. It might be completely misdirected, but they are, they're looking to sort of make a change. And if you've got that sort of ideology behind you that, look, this is important and this is the right thing to do, even if it isn't, you can really motivate people to be dangerous. I mean, the best example of that would be something like January 6th, but it sounds like you're getting sort of like examples of that in Australia as well.
Well, we did have the burning of the doors at Old Parliament House. That was probably the closest that we got.
The doors of the building on fire.
Yeah, Old Parliament House, but that was more of a pseudo-legal sob-sit thing.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we've got there's a huge common law thing here. Like common law it's been around here for a very long time, and it used to be very much on the fringes, but it's becoming more and more and more mainstream. Like all of the groups, like there'll always be that moment where common law kind of steps in and they all want to be sheriffs and I don't consent and all that kind of stuff. So that there's we have a lot of that. A lot of that.
It just the thing that gets me about the common law is like it should be really straightforward. It's like you tell me that this and blah 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 blah. If I say X, Y, and Z, it'll get me out of a traffic ticket. It's like, wow, that sounds fascinating. Can you show me a single example where it's worked? I'll give you an example. I've got a friend that's a copper, and he sometimes gets. Well, I've got two examples. I used to work for a power company, and that thing where people send in the bills and they write on it, this has already been paid by the blah 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 sovereignty. Yeah. There's a whole group in the billing department of this company that I used to work for where they just collect those up and laugh at them and post them straight to the bailiffs. So it doesn't work. And I've got a copper friend, and he was saying, we sometimes get these twats asking, are you standing on your oath, blah, 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 and all of it. And I says, does it work? Is there any combination of words that work? He says, no, in fact, it'll just get me cross enough that I'll hit you with my truncheon.
I love it. That's my specialized subject. Like if there was a mastermind, mine would be the straw man. Me and my straw man.
Oh, it's dreadful. I've spoken about this before. There was once a case that I knew, quite a prominent UK solicitor, and he was, and I won't name it, but basically convinced this lad on a very minor charge to tell the judge that he wants him, that's a straw man, blah, blah, blah. And the judge went, this poor sod doesn't know that he's a real human being, and banged him up in a psychiatric hospital where unfortunately he had a very, very poor reaction to some of the drugs that they gave him, and he died.
Wow.
Yeah.
We've actually got a lot of that going on now. We've got a lot of people that have really been sucked into this belief of the magic words. And, you just need to ask them, you're not in your right jurisdiction. What did you swear your oath to? The Queen of Australia doesn't exist. All this kind of stuff. And we've got more and more people now, stories that we see on Telegram of people being arrested now. Like in the court, they're getting taken away. They're getting put on psychiatric holds. It's actually, it's a bit disturbing, actually, when you just the frequency of it. But sorry, that's my specialized subject. Sorry, Sandee, you go.
No, I was just going to say
all night.
No. I was just going to say we have the red ensign flag in our logo there as well, which is their flag that they've taken on. It's supposed to. Oh gosh. Oh,
explain it, Sandee. Explain the flag.
It's just nonsense. But anyway, that's their flag, the 6-pointed flag. It's a long story. Trust me. We'll be here for another hour. But yeah. No, SOS is really interested in that. It's really quite interesting.
The thing that gets me about that is that, conspiracy series and unsolved mysteries, they all sort of run alongside the concept of corrupt policing or whatever. For example, like, certain police elements covering up stuff in, say, JFK or whatever, like, fights in COINTELPRO against the Black Panthers, that type of thing. So there's this sort of through line of the police are corrupt, or an element of the police, or want the police state, or something like that. So how does that work alongside with, they're desperately corrupt, they will kill you unless you say the right combination of words in the right order, in which case, it stops them, like that fucking thing that he does in Crocodile Dundee. Like, it doesn't really fit for me.
My favorite word of them all that they all say is understand. They won't say understand, because that means that you stand up.
You're standing under.
Yeah. Oh, so they say understand rather than, I love it.
And then, but the way they get away with it, it doesn't work. But they come up with different iterations of it, and then they say that if it didn't work for you, you didn't do it right. So yeah. I mean, and like the main guy is this guy called Wayne Glue, and he's been constitutional expert, common law, whatever, for years and years and years. He lost his house. He lives in a van, like they. And
this is always the case. There's a very famous one in that was in Nottingham. I forget the guy's name. He wore a white hat, and he got sort of swept under the sort of wing of all these things. And it was about not paying his mortgage.
Yeah.
And in the end, he lost his house. And they were doing huge sort of like, we're stood outside protesting, and the police just turned up and said, no, mate, sorry. I can't remember the guy's name, but again, it's not unique. There's loads. In fact, there's who's that stupid woman in Canada at the minute? Thinks she's the Queen. That like all of her supporters are finding that they're having the Queen. That's it. Something like.
Oh, did you like?
Yeah. That's insane. That is like some weird old ladies just turned up. I'm queen of this place now, and people have gone.
We actually
that seems reasonable. That seems fine. Like
we actually seem to have an alternate king.
Oh yeah,
his name's King Stephen, and I am a big King Stephen fan.
What's Greg Hallett got to say about that?
He believes that the crown was vacated when they introduced the imperial crown. And so he declared himself King Stephen of Australia. And there's actually people in Australia who have sworn allegiance to King Stephen. They actually have to take an oath. Yeah.
I think Joel was talking about this. I think Joel was talking about it at some point on our recent episode.
Yeah, I love him.
Stephen.
King Stephen. Stephen Spears, as we call him. But yeah, anyway, I've diverted away. Sorry, I took you down a common law path. It's my favourite thing.
Taking us down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, there's a new rabbit hole.
I did. One thing that I did want to ask about, just to get serious for a second, was I noticed the other day some horrible AI generated winning back Britain, getting Britain back, something.
Oh, yeah.
That old mate Tommy Robinson, I'm assuming, is behind.
Probably him, or someone like Paul Golding, or that Jada Friend, what's the name? There's a lot of horrible far-right shit going on in the UK at the minute.
Yeah, and I'd like to understand, like, how that's working from a language point of view, because I think that one thing that maybe people who, in Australia in particular, who are part of the freedom movement, may not understand that some of the language that they hear and some of the language that they then say is actually a little bit coded language far right.
Oh, yeah.
And they probably just don't even understand. So, like, how do you think that has worked its way into this whole freedom space?
I mean, it's been going on for a long, long time, actually. Like, about sort of 10 years ago, there was a massive resurgence in Holocaust denial. There was a film that came out called The Greatest Story Never Told, that was basically telling you how Hitler was probably really hard done to. And then there was Project Europa, and a resurgence of this concept of the Great Replacement theory and this idea of something called the Kalergi Plan. And basically what all of these things are is ideas that people in Europe want to get rid of the white race. And the most ironic thing is this is a classic example of people not doing their own research, because they keep talking about this thing called the Kalergi Plan, and the Kudendorf something medal. And they framed this guy. He wrote a book, I think it was called Pan Europa, and they frame him as like a sort of they frame him as Jewish, and they also frame him as wanting to destroy all the borders in Europe and basically create a sort of mixed race where there's no people of color, no white people, nothing. And this is to essentially eradicate white people. And the irony is, if anybody would actually read his book, they'll find out that he's actually a white supremacist that felt that black people were not human, and he wanted to enslave Africa because he felt that the African people were animals, and use them as slaves to make Europe a great white prosperous Christian nation. And the Kalergi-Kudendorf Award that people get so bent out of shape about, it was awarded to Angela Merkel. She didn't accept it, but they awarded her 1 year, and so that was enough evidence for people to say, well, this is it, isn't it? This is the New World Order. That particular organization, on their website, it says that we want to put a wall around the edge of Europe. We want to deport all Muslims and make Europe a solely white Christian endeavor. And so these things that they're actually sort of portraying as being sort of examples of wanting to destroy the white race are actually sort of white supremacist things, which is fabulously ironic, basically. But yeah, it's complicated. It was a lot to do with Brexit and to do with the rise of Breitbart, which was essentially set up in the UK to promote the UKIP political party, which was at the time run by Nigel Farage.
Yeah,
there's a sort of a cross-contamination of certain oil interests and certain large corporate interests and private healthcare that's connected to far-right elements of the Conservative Party, essentially, in the UK. And the long and short of it was that they wanted to utilise Brexit in order to privatise UK healthcare and to introduce a load of sort of American insurance-based sort of firms. Unfortunately, what happened was Donald Trump lost the election, and Biden realised that basically the problem with Brexit is it ignores something called the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland. Now, again, this is very, very complicated, but the long and short of it is we stole bits of Ireland years and years ago, and we don't want to give them back for whatever reason. But because of that, you've got two trade zones on the same take the same sort of landmass, and so they don't really know what to do about the border. And the problem is that essentially, to use a sort of an example that the Brexiteers would hate, I could quite happily walk. I could come from anywhere in Europe to Ireland because it's in the EU, and I could happily walk across the border into the Northern Ireland, and then I'm in the UK, so I can then get to the UK. So essentially, there's an open border there that nobody can stop. And this problem has never actually been sort of reconciled, really. But so because of that, they needed to change people's sort of perspectives. And so they used ideas such as immigration and it was mainly immigration, if we're really honest. Like use immigration and lies about sort of rape gangs and grooming gangs and things like this to sort of just build up this this idea that basically people were being attacked. And then what they've quite cleverly done as well is they've appealed to people with the argument of free speech, like saying that, oh, if you say this, they'll throw you in jail. This is quite clever Stuart Lee joke about they will literally throw you in jail if you just mention that you happen to be English nowadays. And it's like, will they? But like, and so a lot of the ideas through free speech are sort of they're what's called a Mott and Bailey argument. Basically, they'll say something that's perfectly acceptable, like "I'm proud to be British." It's like, fine, that's okay, and they'll pretend that they're being persecuted about that, and they're not being persecuted about that. They're being persecuted to the point where their pride becomes couched in extreme nationalism, xenophobia, the idea of an idealized white Christian past, and the idea that basically anybody that doesn't conform to that stereotype is not included in the concept of Britishness. And so it's quite complicated. You've got a lot of levels to it. You've got people at the top connected to sort of corporations and political organizations. And as you trickle down, you've got sort of essentially useful idiots. You've got some people like your sort of Katie Hopkins and Tommy Robinson that are sort of sat in the middle just being rabble rousers. And then you've got idiots like your people like Leilani Dowdings and your Right Said Freds and your Matt Letitiers. And then you've got a load of people that are just sort of desperately trying to get attention, like idiots like Jackie Devoy and people like that are repeating tropes that have trickled down from the top, and they don't examine them because they're not particularly bright. And so basically they don't realize that or don't care that what they're actually espousing is far right propaganda a lot of the time.
We've started like there is this absolute rich thread now of, at a minimum, we need to halt immigration is kind of, what some people are saying. Like this cost of living crisis, we should halt immigration until people here are sorted out. So you can definitely see the start of that, which I watch what goes on across Europe, and it's like, wow, like the rise of the right in Europe is actually pretty scary, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can see it. It's like, you've got Geert Wilders in Holland. You've got what's her name, Meloni in Italy. You got Viktor Orban. A lot of people were pandering to Putin and things like that as well. It was a plan essentially that Steve Bannon started, and it's just going through its sort of different iterations. As I think his initial plan sort of failed. He was with Matteo, the guy from Italy whose name escapes me, the bearded bloke, like that was the sort of point that they were trying to sort of introduce sort of this concept of popularism and right wing. And it's very, very strange because I think initially their sort of push failed, but then a lot of other people or politicians and stuff like that realize that actually, there's an audience that's rabid for this, and they're very loud. And then we get into things like sort of like, GB News, obviously Sky News Australia has been very, very sort of right leaning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the irony as well is just that, like, people go like, they're the only ones that tell the truth. And it's like, what, really? Like, I mean, GB News is run by a person that's like connected to Legatum think tank, big industry. Sky News is Rupert Murdoch. Like, I don't know whether, and that's what annoyed me about a lot of the things, like, is that all of a sudden the conspiracy world is willing to overlook certain things or like, contradict itself essentially because that's the flavor of the month. And it's like, it doesn't really work like that.
And is that how you think that both of you started to kind of scratch your heads and start questioning some of the stuff? Was that it did feel like that there was some things that were getting given a free pass and other things weren't?
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, Brent, do you want to tell your story first now?
Yeah, well, my story more before I do that, I just want to say, like, the immigration thing as well. Like, it's such a distraction. Like, these people are distracting us from the real problems. Like, the people ruining our country are not coming in on dinghies; they're coming on yachts. At the end of the day, you know.
Yeah.
But what I saw politics in a different way. Is kind of what started to bring me out. Like, I had always thought that politicians and leaders were selected, not elected. And with like Brexit, and Trump, it kind of just like completely contradicted what I had been thinking for the 15 years pretty much that I was in. You know, for example, with Trump, Hillary was like always the top elite. Like, she was the person that they were priming to be the first female president. She was literally the establishment, and Trump was like the outsider. So I just figured, okay, it's definitely going to be Hillary. But through social media and all this, I was actually able to see kind of how people were intending to vote, or how they were being swayed to vote for different things. And it kind of actually brought me out of the idea that democracy was just a game that we were playing. It wasn't something that we were actually voting for.
Right.
And seeing that happen, like seeing Trump actually become elected because of like people being essentially manipulated into voting for him. And the exact same thing happened with Brexit. Like, Brexit did not make sense to a conspiracy theorist because, again, if the elections are rigged, right, why on earth would England leave the European Union, which the European Union is a stepping stone to the one world government?
Yeah.
You know, so like, if you're a truther and you believed, say, in democracy, like, yeah, that would be a win. That would be us breaking the New World Order apart or something. But to me, the elections were rigged no matter what. But again, I could see everything kind of unfolding on social media. That is kind of the good thing about social media. You can connect with like actual real people all across, and you can kind of gauge the temperature of what's going on. And those are the things that really, like, it started to break apart the political aspect of my conspiracy beliefs.
Because you're right. Because, I mean, Hillary should have won.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, what I could see at that time was the people that did win, say Trump and the Farage and Boris Johnson kind of camps that were behind Brexit. I also noticed that they were all leaning in on conspiracism. They were essentially trying to recruit the conspiracy movement. And I felt like that was very strange. Like Nigel Farage turning up on Alex Jones' show talking about the New World Order. Like, that was just kind of mind-blowing to me. I was like, what's going on here? Because I know this guy's a terrible human being. He's a terrible racist. Like, I don't agree with this guy. You know?
And also having to accept that Trump was the leader, because again, that immediately went against absolutely everything that you've been told for the last however many years. Like, you can't trust him because he's a billionaire. You can't trust him because he's vaguely related to the royal family. You can't trust him because of basically all this stuff that he did with the mafia and his past racism and his father's connections to the John Birch Society and the Ku Klux Klan and stuff like that. And everyone just went, yeah, no, that's all right. And it's bizarre. Like, you know, I mean, they're doing it again at the minute, like with Elon Musk and Alex Jones massively pandering to Elon Musk. And bizarrely, the only one that's actually sort of sticking to his guns or doing what he should do is David Icke. The only problem is that he's doing it in such a way that is so obviously sort of based in jealousy as opposed to doing, in inverted commas, the right thing. That he can't stand that anyone doesn't listen to him, essentially, is the problem. But yeah, it's like as Brent said, none of that was supposed to happen. Like, Trump wasn't supposed to get elected. Brexit wasn't supposed to happen. Jeremy Corbyn wasn't supposed to be put forward to saying, there's numerous things, basically. With me, it was a sort of chipping away of it. Actually chatting with people in the industry. Like the first thing that sort of really got my sort of back up was I was doing a Rich Planet show with Richard D. Hall, the chap behind the Manchester thing. And, he, for no good reason at all, brought up, so Neil, what do you think about the trans agenda? What do you think about the plot to use trans people to destroy the family unit? Isn't it weird? Isn't it freaky? And I was like, no, I don't think there is an agenda. I think there are just trans people. And I think the exact thing that I said is this thing, I'm baffled by how much time people spend worrying about other people's genitals. Like, I give a shit, to be quite honest. And we sort of had an argument, and it culminated in me saying something along the lines of, Richard, do you want to transition? No. Is there anything that I could say, anything at all that could persuade you to transition? No. Then what the fuck are you worried about, right? Okay, why do you think that everyone else is can be persuaded to do whatever they want to themselves, like just by sort of, hey, this is cool, kids. Why don't you do this, kids? It's like, no, it's just not going to happen. And the next thing I fell out with somebody about on a radio show was about paedophile hunters, because I suggested that actually it's not really a good idea, because it tends to sort of victimize the wrong people. It gives the wrong impression of who it is that's actually committing these crimes. A lot of them don't go to trial because they've been brought around badly. Often people are persecuted wrongly. And most of the time, surprisingly, all these paedophile hunters are ex-racist National Front people and football hooligans that are desperately trying to sort of rehabilitate their image. And it was used again as a pipeline to, it's that Mott and Bailey thing. Nobody could argue with wanting to lock up paedophiles. But the problem is that the next stage is, you'll notice a lot of these paedophiles are Muslim, aren't they? But actually, it's the Jews or something stupid like this. Yeah. And so, there's all that nonsense. And then the final straw with me was twofold. One was COVID, because basically everybody was just being absolutely stupid with that. Like they decided before anything had happened what was going to be the narrative. And the amount of mental gymnastics that were encouraged. I mean, they got to the point where basically, to explain the deaths, they have to now say that, oh no, there was no COVID. They're all murdered by doctors and nurses who gave them sedatives to kill them. It's like, really? Like Pamela from across the road is now a mass murderer, is she? Because she seems really nice to me. That's strange. And climate change as well, because I basically noticed that everybody that comes out against climate change has two things in common. One, they're not actually qualified to be making statements. They're usually like Willie Soon or something like that. Or if they are qualified, like Judith Curry, they're intimately financed by the Heartlands Institute or the fossil fuel industry. And so I was putting it to people in the conspiracy world. It's just like, let's pretend that this was a medicine, because I know you hate medicines. If somebody came out, basically said, I'm not a doctor, but I suggest that you should buy this vaccine. Oh, and by the way, I'm paid by Pfizer. You'd throw that out immediately, regardless of whether it was, good to do that or not. Yeah. And you're not applying that same scrutiny to this because it suits your agenda. The green agenda is some sort of tyranny.
It's actually funny because we had a called Reckless Renewables rally up in Canberra.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. And a whole bunch of politicians all appeared to speak. So we did a bit of an episode on it. And we actually looked at their register of interests. And it was exactly the same thing. It's like, this one's speaking and they have shares in mining. And this one's speaking and they have accepted flights and accommodation and an RACV club membership that was paid for by the mining industry. And we actually said, if this was Fauci, you'd be calling this gain of function.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. The amount of conspiracy theories that if you track it back actually benefit the oil industry is bizarre. And it's one of those things where it's like, look, this is everything that you're supposed to be rallying against. And it's strange because there's almost like a willing amnesia about it, because I watch Gareth Icke, right? Okay. Literally look at a paper that said COVID exists. And he did this sort of weird little shake in his head as if he was wiping it from his memory. And we never spoke of it again. And he was like, right. So that's what we're doing now, is it? We're ignoring reality because this sells better. And that's fine if you're talking about the moon being a spaceship or the Queen being a lizard or anything that's really not going to affect people's lives. But, when you're encouraging people, like what happened was essentially a friend of mine, his sister's not particularly well. And she's a huge fan of David Icke, and she put herself into really dangerous situations because she refused to mask up or get a vaccine or believe that COVID was real. And she was one of these people where if she'd have caught it, she could have very easily died.
Wow.
And at that point, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, for praise on the internet, you're going to tell people stuff that not only is harmful, but if we're honest, I think is harmful. And you've decided to do that anyway because it benefits you. But it only benefits him in the way where basically I am so clever. Look, I am so smart. And it's like, is it really worth it? Is that really worth it? Like, couldn't live with myself, to be quite honest.
I think, Sandee, you had some questions about how to deal with like friends or family who are maybe still in there.
Yeah, I wanted to come in tonight. One of my pressing questions, it's a bit of a two-parter, but basically, with us doing this podcast over the last couple of years, we do get people that reach out to us who are friends and families of some of the subjects that we've talked about, or they've reached out to us and said that they've got a friend or a loved one who is down the rabbit hole. And they often come to us for like advice, and we don't know what to say to them. What I wanted to ask you guys, especially Brent, I know you came out of the rabbit hole. Both of you, sorry. But what was it that your friends and family did that you appreciated as you were coming back out of the rabbit hole, that you could then pass along some ideas to people who are listening right now?
So my friends and family, like one of the things they never did was cut me off. They never, they would never try to argue with me or any of that kind of thing, but to be fair, they didn't know how to. They didn't understand the topics. They didn't understand what I was really talking about. So they just would never be able to engage with me or whatever. But they also never cut me off, which you do see a lot now. You do see a lot of people like completely falling out with each other because they just are so polarized. But yeah, the thing I would really try and say is like, no matter what someone, like, just think of it as if they've joined a new political party or they've joined a new religion or something. You wouldn't cut them off for that, even if you didn't believe the same sort of thing. And what I would really say is just like, try and keep them close, no matter what. Like, if you don't understand the topics that they're talking about, then just ask, like, can we talk about something else? Because can we just like talk about the game, or can we talk about whatever it is that you guys are interested in? But the other thing is, like, if you do have that time, you do have that energy and the will to actually engage with them, like, do it with kindness, do it with respect, because you have a relationship with this person. They love you. They respect you. You love them. You respect them, and you should always tell them that, like, we might disagree on something, but don't forget, like, we've loved each other for 20 years. I would die for you. Remind them of that, and that this isn't something that we should fall out about. And what you really, really, really need to do is actually understand what it is they believe, understand why they believe it, which is kind of what we're trying to do with our podcast, obviously. We're trying to show you the bones of a conspiracy theory. And that's kind of what Neil's doing with his research. And then I pipe in and try and explain
why that might be believable to people. And you need to understand those two things if you're going to engage with them, because if you don't understand why it's believable, not just why it's wrong, but why someone would believe that, then you're not going to really be able to pull them out, essentially. But those are the things I feel like you need to do. You need to understand the conspiracy. You need to understand why it's believable, but also then understand why it's wrong. And if you can kind of have those conversations with them, you don't have to take apart the whole Jenga tower today. Just try and pull one Jenga tower out. Like, let's say, just go for chemtrails. You don't have to go through the WEF or the whole conspiracy, all of their beliefs or anything. Just like tackle, say, one subject that you might be interested in. Because you're not going to change their mind completely today. Like, I've got a friend myself who is like as conspiratorial as I was. Like, he's been down that rabbit hole for many, many years. And like, I have no chance of pulling him out of the full conspiracism just yet. But with one conversation, I did pull out the chemtrail Jenga tower, that Jenga block, just by being able to answer some of the questions that he had. Now he's kind of like, okay, yeah, maybe it isn't that they're spraying, chemicals on us to depopulate the world or whatever. And yeah, actually, pollution's a really bad thing. So that's obviously what's just going on. That's the trails that I see. It's just pollution. And I can be angry at that instead of being angry about something that they're not actually doing.
Yeah, definitely. And just what helped for me was to sort of reframe. I mean, we don't really debunk, but we sort of like deep dive, so to speak, and often it ends up debunking. But you get a certain rush out of conspiracy theories, like getting to that understanding and getting to that sort of place where you say, oh, that's why this happened or whatever. So what we try and do with the podcast is we're giving you the same thing, basically, like, but it's like the next level of it. So rather than understanding the conspiracy theory, it's understanding where the conspiracy came from and why the conspiracy came out and why certain people would want you to believe that. So it's almost like the conspiracy behind the conspiracy. And in that way, we're sort of offering people the same, I don't know, dopamine hit or whatever, the same gratification from solving a puzzle that they actually got from being involved in conspiracies, basically. So there's that. And also, we do acknowledge that conspiracies do happen. Like, rich people conspire, crimes happen, espionage happens, there's corporate crimes, there's all those sorts of things. But potentially there is a conspiracy. The conspiracy theories are there to stop you looking at the real conspiracy theories, if that makes sense. Like, do you know what I mean? Whilst you're sort of bothering looking to see if is the Queen a lizard, we're totally ignoring banking scandals and embezzlement of public funds and lobbying organizations and stuff like that. The greatest example of that is the Bohemian Grove, where essentially, like, there are problems, or the World Economic Forum, where there are problems with both of those organizations, in as much as basically large corporations get access to politicians in behind the scenes talks that we will never fully know what's happened there. And in such a way, they can spread influence in a way that sort of goes outside of the normal democratic process. But what it isn't is Satanism or world communism. And so this is the problem, that they probably love that. If you think of it from a conspiratorial mindset, if I was the World Economic Forum, I'd love it that everyone thought that we were a satanic organization that was trying to install world communism, because whilst you're moaning about that, we're getting away with all the stuff that we actually do, which is basically getting our projects done and getting kickbacks from the government and making huge amounts of money and actually causing environmental damage whilst pretending that we give a shit. And so that if you can frame these things like this, people are still on the hunt, if you know what I mean. You're still doing the sort of the same investigative work that you were doing, in inverted commas, when you were looking for conspiracy theories. Now, just to go back to your original point, about whether your friends and family were like trying to get you out of it or whatever. Weirdly, a friend of mine came up to me the other day and went, "Look, I do like your podcast and everything. I think you're really, really good and whatnot, but you don't trust the government, do you?" It's like, no, of course I don't trust the government. I've not gone that far the opposite direction. But yeah, so it's interesting.
It is really what they think, though. Like, we get that a lot, like, in comments. Is like, "Oh, but I bet you trust the government." And it's like, no.
No,
no, we don't trust the government, actually. And we were probably not trusting the government long before you realised the governments weren't to be trusted.
Yeah, precisely. So
Sandee has got an absolute cracker of a question, and I'll get her to ask it, and then we might wind it up, because I'm very conscious that you two have probably got a million things to do, and it's the start of your day. But Sandee has a very good question.
Okay, yes. So the final question is, so SOS and I have spent the last few years really deep inside there. Here in Australia, we've been really deep inside their echo chambers. That we often get told, you watch mainstream media, stop watching the news. Like, we're not watching the news. We're actually spend more time in watching you and what you have to say and listening to all your views. Why is it that me and SOS are not pilled? Like, how come we're not getting pilled? Why? What's happening? What's the predisposition?
Well, it's got nothing to offer you. Like, I mean, if you look at the sort of things that pill people and stuff like that, it's some type of explanation as to, would be one or two things, right? One, an explanation as to why your life isn't perhaps going the way that it might go, and two, a sort of clarification or solidification of an existential threat. Because, like, you know, I don't want to come across as all Jean-Paul Sartre, right? Okay, but, like, you know, that is a sort of concept of human reality. This idea of being worried about outside influences and people sort of getting at you or whatever, and the fragility of life, etc., etc., etc. Like, we're complicated beings, and all these sort of traumas and concerns can be channeled into something that basically isn't necessarily the answer, but it provides you with a psychological answer. Like, it's the Illuminati. That's why we're going to war. That's why this is happening. That's why X, Y is happening and stuff like that. But if you're in a position where basically, frankly, you don't care about that, because, I mean, I'll put it this way, right? Okay. I noticed recently when having a chat with Joel, actually, and sort of going back and examining getting out of it, there was a correlation between me being happier and more satisfied in life and work, etc., and not needing conspiracy theories anymore to fill a gap.
Yeah.
So it could be that. And I'm not saying that's always the case, obviously, because, you know, people get into conspiracies primarily because they're fun. Like, you wouldn't do it if you didn't get some sort of enjoyment out of it. Now, off the back of that, people can tend to sort of like incorporate it into their own identity or something and give themselves a purpose or whatnot. But so I suppose, and this is highly speculative, but it may well be that basically because you didn't need that, you had a purpose, or you were perfectly comfortable in your position, or, you know, in yourself, and didn't feel the need to sort of have some sort of talisman hanging around your neck that says, look, this is what I do as a person.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I would say, I know we were joking about we don't trust the government or whatever, but I would say both of you must at least have some sorts of trust in institutions, in some sort of demarcation line that I didn't have. Like, you know, let me go back to the beginning of, again, where I fell into the 9/11 rabbit hole. It was 2003, and we were on the cusp of war with Iraq, and everyone's saying, like, the weapons of mass destruction thing is a lie. And so I'm coming at this thinking, like, I really don't trust the governments at all. And I'm seeing in the press that they're actually pushing this same thing, but the UN is saying it's not true. So I'm looking at the media thinking, well, all of you guys are lying. Everything, this is all
super, super corrupt. Everyone's lying about this thing, and we all know that it's not true. And I joined protest marches here in England, and there was millions of us on the street protesting about this weapons of mass destruction thing. And this is when I came across the 9/11 stuff, and it showed me that Bush, like basically, and the neocons had set up 9/11 to do this thing. So because I was in this very, very untrustworthy stage of my life, very anti-government, anti-war, all of that, it really fed into that for me. And like with the difference between, say, the COVID era of conspiracism is a lot of people that don't fall down that hole is because they do have a trust in the institutions of, say, medicine and science. You know, you might still have that distrust in the media or in the government, but science is the thing that backs this up to say that this is not, these conspiracies about this is not true. You know, and I think having some sort of trust still in an institution is like, that's super healthy. But you should, but obviously it's whether or not you have a little bit of trust or a lot of trust, or like these things can become super exaggerated. But I think that's possibly why a lot of people didn't like fall into the rabbit hole here, because of like the trust in science, the trust in the institution of that consensus.
Yeah, that's actually, spot on. I reckon, trust in the medical system. That was for me, because I'm in the medical system. And so for me, I was like, I could see they made mistakes along the way, and I saw those mistakes. But overall, I felt that, they took a good response. They were responding to a real threat that I saw, and I was, quite happy. So then when these people were saying that COVID wasn't real from the start, I was like, well, I already know you're wrong. So everything else you said after that is wrong. But
Well, it's the introduction of nuance as well, isn't it? Because that was always the thing, like with the COVID. It's like, so you're saying that you agree with the lockdown? Yes, in principle. So are you saying that it was employed well? No, it was employed poorly because they didn't give a shit. But thinking that something was done badly and thinking that it shouldn't be done at all, it's a bit like, well, you didn't really sort of put the fire out. So next time, just don't bother at all. Let them all burn. Like it's ridiculous. Like, and so that nuance was completely lost on people, and is a lot of the time in conspiracism, the idea that basically you don't have to necessarily agree with something, or something could be done badly, or something could be done, that was a good idea at the start, but then circumstances changed or whatever. But you have to come from a perspective that everything is a plot and everything is organized. And so you have to ascribe motive to everything. And if you've got that lack of trust, like Brent was saying, then the motivation that you ascribe to everything is nefarious and malicious. And that's where it gets properly dangerous, where basically you've gone past the point of being curious and suspicious of systems and institutions and people in power, to the point where you reject anything that comes through the mainstream, by which I mean, like, literally, if it's on the news, then it's not true. The opposite is true. And that's what people do. It's like, well, it says on the news that for example, I don't know, you can pick anything. It says on the news that King Charles is in hospital at the minute. And so everybody's going, well, he's obviously not. So what's going on? And I've heard everything from he's dead to they're about to abolish the monarchy, to he's having experimental sort of, he's going to $6 billion man sort of stuff. Like, so, it gets very silly.
So I have one question that I will ask that someone asked me to ask you guys.
Yeah.
And that would be, of all the different conspiracy theorist people, who do you think is the most cooked?
Oh, God. Right.
Oh, when you
Brent,
say
do you wanna
cooked,
go?
do you mean like who actually pilled, properly actually does believe what they're talking about?
Does believe it. I agree. Not Alex Jones. It's, it's a business for Alex. But
Do you
someone,
mean the most insane? Because if you go for the most insane, it's probably someone like a Santos Bonacci or an Ed.
oh, wow.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like he's a vile character who's
Yeah.
in a very, very tiny echo chamber of his own creation. So yeah, but this is the thing. Because of that, I think that he doesn't appeal to a particularly broad audience because he is so clearly off his shit.
Yeah, very much.
I'm
Who would
going
you
to
say?
go, because we got to like think about who actually believes what they're talking about. Then the first person that came to my mind was James Delingpole.
Oh yeah, a good one. Yeah, he's gone loony, hasn't he? Poor sod.
Yeah.
Like James Burnford, so people understand, was a once respectable is not the right word, but like he was he was a journalist, and I think he's written for things like the Telegraph. It was Spectator. Was he editor in chief of the Spectator or something like that? So he was knocking around in that sort of right wing press type thing, and then he became convinced of all of the New World Order. So we were watching an interview with him the other day, and with Richard D. Hall. And if I was brutally honest, when I put it on, I was like, "Oh, this will be interesting because I'm sure you'll get lots of pushback." Not one bit of it. James Delingpole, like he bought the crisis actor thing. Understood that it has happened in other places like the marathon bombing, Boston bombing, and stuff like that. He was saying that this was all fake and other things were fake and stuff like that. And he believed it. You could see he genuinely believed it.
Wow.
Yeah. But it just goes to show that basically, he's an intelligent, I think he went to somewhere like Oxford or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like he's a very intelligent, very successful man who comes from, who knocks around in circles where basically, serious journalists and serious people knock about in. And he's still gone down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Do you want to know who my favorite believer in everything?
Yeah.
Is Eddie Bravo.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah.
He believes everything. Like it doesn't matter what it is. I love listening. I remember once watching a 3-hour Joe Rogan with Eddie and Alex.
Jesus.
Yeah. I think I've seen that one.
It was unbelievable.
I think I saw that.
You mentioned that because on Knowledge Fight, it was an old episode. They were talking about they've got hold of some of Alex Jones's texts off the back of the trial, and he's basically Eddie Bravo messaging him saying, "When are you going to start about flat Earth? Blah 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 blah." And he's saying to Eddie Bravo, "You know what? I've looked at it, and I can't deny it. I think you're onto something, Eddie. Yeah, we'll definitely get you on the show." And then he messages somebody like Roger Stone or Mike Cernovich or something like that, and it's like, "How the hell do we get rid of Eddie Bravo talking about all this flat Earth shit?" Like, it's just,
I love Eddie Bravo. Well, thank you so much, and I'm sure everyone who's on this already listens to your podcast, but if people don't listen to your podcast, we strongly, I love a new episode. I think the way that you guys do run your deep dives is magnificent. I think the Pizzagate one and the chemtrails one as well, but Pizzagate for me was exquisite. And I think that if people want to understand how people can believe this stuff, you have to go down that journey of opening your mind to everything that they've heard. Because I'll be honest, when I got to episode 4 of Pizzagate, I'm like, shit, they're onto something.
That almost happened with Joel whilst we were doing it as well, didn't it? Which just kind of convinced him halfway through. But yeah, well, thank you very much. That's very, very kind of you. But that is what we hope to do as well, is to basically give the conspiracy a fair go for a number of reasons. One, because basically, like, if you don't, like, you know, somebody, they're almost like the sort of Black Knight in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's like, I've had your arm off. It's like, yeah, but I can still keep going. So you've got to take all the limbs off before they even start to go, all right, maybe we should look at this. So, yeah, thank you very much for that. That's very kind of you.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you to you guys for giving up your time for us. And thanks to everyone for listening. And make sure you're following Some Dare Call It Conspiracy. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your sleep. Enjoy your day if you're joining us from the UK. And take care.
Excellent. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Next week, we'll be releasing our chat with Rupert Reed, the director of Climate Majority Project and former spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion. If you don't want to wait a week for that, then head on over to patreon.com/somedarecallitconspiracy and listen to the early release. Thanks for listening.